one of the things that's most important in organizations is creating an environment that escalation is okay. I mean, we're taught it very young is that if I tell on something, I might get in trouble or it might come back on me. It takes time to create that environment.
You're listening to the How Manufacturers Improve podcast, hosted by me, Kirby Sneen with the Manufacturers Alliance. If you've ever wondered how some leaders, change efforts, or manufacturing companies have become so successful, then you're in the right place. In each episode, we cover the successes and lessons learned of industry leaders, then break it all down into actionable insights so that you can use them to make improvements. This episode is going to be all about mistake proofing and features operations executive George Murray. Enjoy. George, super excited to have you on the podcast. Appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
I'm looking forward to digging into mistake proofing and talking about all your examples and getting into my questions because I know you got a lot of great examples. Before we get there, would you bring everyone up to speed on your background?
Sure. 8 years in the military, Army vet, and post that, I just got to 30 years. So I've been around the block a time or two. Primarily in operations, supply chain, done a couple of expat assignments. That's me.
Nice. So then let's jump into mistake proofing. I want to talk to you right away about the impact that you've seen it make. What kind of examples and measurable results have you seen?
Well, I think everybody will say the standard answer. There's been really significant improvements. I think, first of all, one of the things that I like is, standard work. It's really interesting in going into a lot of the companies that I've worked in the past is that you would expect that they would have simple standard work of processes, and they don't. Or maybe it hasn't been looked at in quite a few years, or people are not following the standard work they have identified. One of the examples is, a quote process from a company that I'd worked at before, where it was really challenging. We could talk about that.
I would love to talk about that. I also want to ask you about how it could be a closed loop process so that it gets reviewed on some sort of regular basis. Before we go there, though, I wanted to talk about focus. So when we get a lot of members that say there's so much opportunity here, right? And there's these long laundry list of these potential improvements. How do you whittle it down to the few that are really critical that'll have a big impact?
Sure. I think the data analysis, you've got to have somebody that can pull real data versus the gut feel, right? Because even with people as experienced as I have been, tend to want to go to gut and find out that it's got a very insignificant impact. So I had a boss that I used to work with that drove me crazy that said, the data will set you free. Always go to the data. And I realized years after I should have listened to him. I was a little green at the point, but it's true. Getting the data, reviewing all the opportunities, and looking at the return on investments of those.
If you're a team lead supervisor and you see opportunity, what kind of data should you start to maybe look for?
I think, trends, looking at gaps. Also, for example, in a production line, you look at some of the biggest fallouts. Like, for example, electronics assembly, right? Soldering is one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest opportunities we see in both in quality as far as throughput is insufficient solder, right? Making sure people are trained, they understand it. They're also inspecting quality building quality in and not inspecting. And they're also checking their own work and checking the work previously. So you're building that quality in the process. So
you've got some leaders focused on opportunities, they're prioritized. Now you want to help mobilize the team. I know sometimes, though, team members can feel threatened when you start talking about processes and standardizing things and mistake proofing them because they feel like, well, hey, if we do this, are they going to need me? And so how do you work with them, not against them, so they don't feel threatened?
I think you've got to provide an environment, you've got to first look at psychological safety, right? What's in it for me? and kind of calm the waters from them feeling that way. You've got to incorporate them in those decision-making processes, and you've got to give them the benefits as to how does this help me, right? What am I going to do in order to turn around and help the business so that I can actually stay beyond the week of the process improvement plan or the workshop? And so I think the fact is if you be able to provide all those and you actually listen to truly listen and not listen to respond, people get that. And I think part of the process of communication is making sure when you're communicating, you're also reading the room, you're watching body language. Are people engaged? Are you actively asking open-ended questions so that you're getting responses, not just head tosses and so forth? So I think all those particular things that you have to do, either as a project lead or the leader of the organization, you have to do those things.
The other thing that I hear that kind of pushes back against mistake proofing is that doesn't apply here. And it usually comes from organizations that are more custom or in an operating environment that's more engineer to order.
Sure.
And so do you have experience in that environment with mistake proofing, and or what do you recommend those folks do that still want to make improvements in that custom environment?
No. I think I've been in those environments before. I think it really goes back to the basics, right? The basics are the basics for a reason. Ironically enough, it's like common sense. You would expect everybody to know those. And to me, it's simple things like bills of material, checklists, those types of things that you can do in any particular organization that can bring some stability, some consistency, cadence. I always love cadence coming from the military and then applying it to its standard work. What are some of the things in an engineering environment that for example, we used in an earlier example that we talked about in the quote process, right, is we looked at, okay, does the customer really understand our quote process? Because we were taking quite a long time to get quotes turned around, more than a couple of months. And, sometimes it's also really important for us just to be the first in order to win business. But the customer was always coming back and asking multiple questions, as opposed to us giving them a checklist and saying, here's what we expect to receive in a quote, which basically helped reduce 3 to 4 weeks of that back and forth time.
Yeah, get rid of all that rework.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, here's another one I wanted to throw past you. How do we get operators and engineers to collaborate more? Oftentimes I'll see operators or even techs say, well, yeah, but we got to get engineering involved, and there's this big backlog, and they're the ones that control, this ECO process, and that's going to take weeks or months and a bunch of sign-offs, and it's us versus them, and it just doesn't go anywhere half the time. How do we get more collaboration in that environment?
Yeah, I think I'm sure this kind of alludes to the whole silo effect. Well, that silo and people guess, well, they don't seem to be working in my favor or the company's favor, right? They're off doing their own thing. I think the fact is first communicating with each particular group what our goals and objectives are, right? And then making sure that the other departments do the same. And then taking, for example, like you said, operators and engineers and moving them closer to one another. I can tell you in an organization, part of culture change, we moved all the engineers out of the manufacturing floor, right? So that people didn't have to spend maybe 45 minutes going chasing and following. And we required them to be at least 50% on the line. So every hour on the hour, it was kind of like a Gemba walk. They would go out and check and see whether or not that they needed help or input. And I think they also need to understand is that nobody else other than an operator knows that machine or knows that process better than them. So it's better to get the inputs from them. And then from a technical standpoint, how can I help them and service them to be more productive? Because again, it makes the day go by faster, right? And I think that's all people want to do is they want to make sure that they, are doing the work that they were hired to do, they're being listened to, and their concerns are being addressed in a timely manner, all of which will help the organization in its bottom line, right? So it's a collaboration of the end result is to help you, help engineering, and help the company. It's not just one person.
Love it. I've got a few more questions before I let you go here, but you're making me think of that classic but unfortunate joke of why do we see that red andon light? It's because nobody's there right now.
Yes.
When in fact, it should be just the opposite.
Almost put a buzzard under somebody's seat.
Right. Okay, so what are just some real practical, straightforward examples of mistake-proofing devices? You know, can you put a pin in it so you can't insert it this way?
Sure.
Or what have you done that's been real practical with like the soldering example so that, you've got a physical device or something in there that you can implement?
Well, I think in one particular area, we did through-hole assembly in a company I worked for before, and we actually put a lighting systems to remove a lot of the errors that we were placing through-hole components in wrong particular areas. So they press the button, take the part, etc. Not only helped with less rework, but it also helped with efficiency and throughput. So ironically enough, through-hole basically process actually increased efficiency more than 30% just by doing that. And the cost of it was a fraction of the cost that we would think. You'd think that it would be elaborate in electronics and everything else, and it was like less than $20,000.
Nice.
But you're talking about a particular volume of product that's probably second or third in the overall scheme of our revenue that actually increased 30% throughput.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Any other examples come to mind that are just real practical, straightforward? Pins, switches, guides, stops, shoots, anything where you're like, hey.
Well, I think the audible alarms are important. The fact is that manufacturing could be very busy, and people can, like your example earlier, can be overshadowed or overlooked. I think the fact is that you have to make sure that not only the andon light with the alarm, which I like, the strobe lights, is that it's out of the ordinary, right? It can't be something that's like other particular lights in the system. And then it's also audible as well, so that people around it, and it's a communication process, right? If you hear and see this and you don't see anybody around that andon light in a few minutes, then you need to turn around and escalate. And I think that's one of the things that's most important in organizations is creating an environment that escalation is okay. I mean, we're taught it very young is that if I tell on something, I might get in trouble or it might come back on me.
Oh, right. And we've all heard time is money.
Exactly. But you have to be able to create the environment, like back to the earlier example I used in psychological safety. It takes time to create that environment. You can't just come in and turn on the light and say, listen, guys, we're creating an escalation process. You can go even over my head to the senior vice president of operations, et cetera. And then people are like, sure, we know it's been historical the last 5 or 10 years. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it makes me think of some of our members in the medical device space, device and instrumentation, where for quality reasons, that quality leader will go right to the president and say, well, no, we actually can't ship these. There is a problem with this device. And how it's structured that way, and for good reason. But does it always happen? Does the culture always allow that to happen? Because operations is always pressed to say, get it out, get it out, get it out.
Sure.
So,
but I think it's back to creating the culture. I think that's one of the things that I'm so passionate about, especially the last 5 to 10 years, is organizational development. It's you have to be a leader that creates that environment and know that it's not going to be on a turn. It's going to take time. You yourself are going to have to be a guinea pig and an example to ensure that people can go to you without retaliation, and they can go above you when they said, hey, George, I brought this to you 3 times and you didn't do nothing. And it's like, yep, you're absolutely right. You have every right to do that.
Do you need to improve quality and efficiency and want to use mistake proofing to do it? Avoid the high cost of hiring an external consultant and do what our top members do. Develop your own internal champion by enrolling them in our Lean Practitioner certification. Click the link in the show notes to learn when the next certification starts. Okay, so now I do want to go back to a point you made earlier about making sure that things get reviewed, because you've got the process, you've got standards, you've got documentation, perhaps you implemented a couple of mistake-proofing measures, but now what do you do to make sure that that process is closed loop and is always improving, not just now, at the status quo?
One of the organizations that I worked at, we had a tier board process, which I really loved, in the fact that it starts right on the manufacturing floor, right, with the leads and the employees. Here's our safety, here's our quality for the day, here's our goals for the day as far as operations, here's the challenges, and then it kind of has the who does what by when as far as actions. And then there's the tier 2 process that happens shortly after, where the managers basically get escalated to those concerns that the floor can't support. Or needs additional support and help. And then the tier 3 are the executive leadership team of the organization or the department, et cetera. And the things that can't be held and addressed at the manager level get addressed at the executive level. So there's that consistency, and it's visual, right? So they put an action item that says George said that he would do this by this date. Basically is visual, and you know who's accountable for it, so you know the person to go to. How many times you've gone into an organization and people are like, hey, I have this great idea. I either told this person, which is probably not the right person, or I don't know who to go to.
Yep. Yeah, worst case scenario, that idea ends up in the old suggestion box.
Yeah.
That's locked.
Yeah.
And at best, it gets opened once a quarter.
Yeah, or it just slips right into the waste paper basket.
The shredder underneath it, worst case scenario. Okay, last question for you. Just generally, I know you've got a few things you're excited about, but what are you excited about improving next?
Well, for me, at least professionally, is always growth. It's one of the things that I'm very excited in my role. And one of the things that I made the selection is I had two things that, A, to impact a culture, right? Take it from good to great. And that takes time. You can't, like you said, I'm the new guy on the block and the light turns on and everybody's rah, rah, rah. And then the second thing is the overall growth plan for the operation. There's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of capabilities at our operation. And so I want to be able to make sure that we're showing that in the best light so that we can turn around and really grow. We have the capabilities of doing that.
Love it. Next time I see you, I'm going to ask you about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, George.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Kirby Snee with the Manufacturers Alliance, and this is the How Manufacturers Improve podcast. If you liked learning these high-level best practices from experienced peers, and you want your team to be able to access more in-depth process improvement and leadership training and education, I'd invite your company to become a member of the Manufacturers Alliance. To learn how top manufacturers are using their Manufacturers Alliance membership to develop their people, improve processes, and get better results, go to mfrall.com or just click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.